Right. So, good evening and welcome to the London Borough of Hackney's Planning Subcommittee. My name is Councillor Vincent Stocks and I should be chairing this evening's meeting. The Council will be recording this and making it available after the meeting. And proceedings are also being live streamed on YouTube. Please bear this in mind if your microphone and camera are on. We're meeting remotely, as you'll probably know, because of the crisis, and the government has instructed us all to stay at home. The Chief Planning Officer at the Ministry of Housing has outlined in a letter all of the importance of us getting on and running planning committees, etc., and the planning service operating. So we are legally, and we can debate our decisions in this new way, rather than being all in the town hall. We'll try and replicate what we normally do as close as possible. Councillor Potter, welcome. And I'm sure it'll be a success. The technology has a chat function, but we try really not to use it, only in emergencies to contact the ICT people. So I'm able to manage the meeting. I'd ask each specific application for only committee members and those officers involved and the objectors and applicants to have their camera on. And that means I can shut down other people without cameras, so I only can focus on the people in the meeting. When you're on, your camera is on, that means you can participate. Generally keep your microphone switched off and unmute them when you want to speak. In the event of any internet outage, we'll try and get ourselves going again, but please bear with us. And we've had one successful run with this, so we know it works, and we'll try and make this one work as well. Can I introduce members of the committee here this evening? So there's Councillor Hanson, Councillor Fajana Thomas. Is she here yet? She's not. She said she'd be late.
Yes.
Councillor Levy, Councillor Bell, Councillor Snell has just arrived, Councillor Potter, Councillor Race, and Councillor Chauhan. He's his first time as a substitute on the committee. Just while we're on committee members, Councillor Joseph has just had a child, so we can congratulate her, but she isn't here this evening. I'll introduce also, we've got the head of planning, Natalie is in the room, so to speak. Gareth, who some of you have spoken to this evening, is our committee officer, and we've got a legal officer, Tom, to help us make sure we run the thing well. There are more officers here from the council to advise us. Before moving on to the agenda, I will take a couple of minutes to describe how things work. Here we are. We'll hear each application summarised by officers, and then a 5-minute statement from applicants and objectors. Actually, in the first item, we haven't got an objector here, and so we won't have an objector and applicant speaking. We'll just be hearing from the applicant if we ask questions. It's my role to make sure that members have all the information they need to make a decision, objectors and applicants have their say, and that the meeting runs properly. I'll not be taking any contributions from the floor. This is a meeting in public, it's not a public meeting. You must have given notice to the Governance Service Officer before the meeting by registering to speak. As I've said, applicants and objectors will have 5 minutes, and I'll give them some warning when their time is coming to an end. This is a quasi-judicial body. It's a type of legal tribunal. Members are not representing either their wards nor their political parties. We make our decision on the basis of any site visits we've made, what we've read in the reports, and of course what we hear this evening. We must only take account of the policies adopted by the council, other material planning policies and material planning considerations. Members making the decision will not have allowed themselves to be lobbied by either applicant nor objector nor anyone else. They'll not have taken a view on the application before this evening. If they have been lobbied, they're advised to remove themselves from the decision. Similarly, if they have any interest in the application site, all the people involved, they should declare that interest and may remove themselves from the decision. Okay. When we've finished our deliberations, we'll vote on the recommendation and I'll describe the voting procedure before we vote. When the decision is made, that's the end of the matter for the committee. The applicant may appeal our decision to the Secretary of State. Objectors may seek legal redress and advise you to seek professional advice in each case. I'll now ask each member of the committee participating remotely to introduce themselves by confirming they can see and hear the proceedings and the other participants. The attendance of those members at the meeting will be recorded by the Democratic Services officers. And then we'll move to the agenda. So if we could just introduce ourselves. Councillor Hanson. Okay. Councillor Thomas. Not yet here. Councillor Levy?
Yeah, present.
Councillor Bell?
Good evening.
Councillor Snell?
Good evening.
Okay. Councillor Potter?
Hello there.
Councillor Race?
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Shohan?
Good evening.
Okay. And I think I just saw a Mr. Tommaso appear. There he is. Okay, up there. Welcome.
Hi, good evening.
Okay, so I've just gone through a few of the preliminaries. I don't think you will have missed much apart from the fact that you have 5 minutes to say, to outline your objection. And now we'll move to the agenda. So the agenda, apologies for absence. We have one, and that's Councillor Joseph.
That's correct, Chair.
Declarations of interest. My only slight declaration of interest is I have an allotment plot. If you look on your drawing of the Leaside Road, it's just across the railway, but I won't be declaring an interest because I have no financial interest in the allotment plot, but I do have one, so I know the site. I don't have anything else for this evening's meeting apart from the items in front of you. But I can just tell you that the Evering Road item has been withdrawn. Apparently we need some more details. Is that right, Natalie?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, that's correct. Item 7 has been withdrawn. Just seeking some further details on the application.
Okay.
The application has not been withdrawn, but been drawn from the agenda.
Withdrawn from the agenda, yes. Okay. So there's no minutes, so we're going to move straight to item 5. Just to say again, we have Tommaso in the room as an objector, and we have Stephen Freeman, who's the applicant's agent, who is just here to answer questions. So without any more ado, we've got Nick Bovard is presenting the first item. Thank you, Nick.
Visible to everyone?
Hello, yes, it's going up.
Yeah, we got it. Thank you, Nick.
The site is 87 to 95 Hertford Road, and I'm the case officer.
Hang on. It's only gone up in one of my boxes. Is that right, Mario? Can everybody else see the whole screen?
I can see the screen. Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I can see a slide.
Okay, I can see a slide in one of my boxes. Okay.
You
Okay,
can
carry on.
pin it to the screen, Chair, and then it'll take up your full screen.
Okay.
If you press the icon of a map pin.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Before I begin, I'll draw your attention to the addendum to the committee report, which relates one further objection received subsequent to the report and clarifies the position in relation to the demolition of the rear buildings of the site. I also note for the minutes, in recommendation A of the report, relating to the listed building consent, which should refer to application reference 2020-0684 and not 2020-2684. One other note for the minutes is that the condition at paragraph 8.1.38 should be amended to reflect that any B2 use would be closed on Sundays and bank holidays. The site contains a group of vacant factory and warehouse buildings to the south of de Beauvoir Square and in the de Beauvoir Conservation Area. This is the second time this application for this site has been before committee, having been approved previously in 2010. The approved scheme, though similar in its layout and massing, was inferior in many respects to the current proposal and was decided under UDP policies. The Section 106 for that scheme was never agreed. Subsequently, the scheme was revived with new drawings and further consultation, and this is the scheme before you now. This is the view towards the site looking north, with de Beauvoir Square to the top of the screen and the site placed directly below. Kingsland Road runs north-south to the right of this picture. The main application, 2009-2842, is for the demolition of the rear buildings, including the Sawtooth Central building. It would retain the L shape of the buildings facing the camera here and fronting Hertford Road. The site is locally listed, but these are the two main heritage elements. A mixed-use development of employment floor space and 6 residential dwellings would be constructed around a central courtyard. 2020-0684 is an associated listed building consent. The site does not contain a listed building, but an existing wall to be demolished appears to have been built above the curtilage-listed garden wall of the listed buildings of de Beauvoir Square to the north. This wall is the closest element of the site to the camera in this view. There is no objection to the demolition or rebuilding of this wall, the significance of which is considered to be solely as part of its curtilage listing. Looking east over Mortimer Road, this final aerial view shows again how the site is surrounded by residential development. These two buildings are to be retained. To the left of the screen is the former mission chapel for St. Peter's Church. It was last year a factory, but is now in repair. The wider warehouse-style building to the right is known locally as the Boris Building, owing to the large lettering attached to the frontage. These photographs show the inside of the Mission Chapel building, with its internal crane and poor levels of light. There's currently only one internal level. The Boris Building is arranged over the 2 levels shown here. It still contains the machinery last used for making bags. The top picture here shows the rows of shelving within the central sawtooth-roofed building of the site, which is to be demolished. The bottom picture is for the northernmost building, also to be demolished. This building is in particularly poor condition. Neither of these 2 elements are considered to have significant heritage value. This photograph shows the large space within the rear building of the site. This building backs onto the gardens of Mortimer Road. While there are elements of heritage interest, the demolition of this building is not objected to on conservation grounds. The massing of the existing buildings can be seen on these elevations. And the existing plans show that the site is generally laid out over ground floor level only, with high ceilings to reflect the use. The Boris Building is the only one with 2 stories at present. The proposed ground floor plan shows the retained buildings to the front, with a passage laid out through the Boris Building to the courtyard in the centre of the development. The separate commercial and residential cycle stores are located within the courtyard, along with 2 areas of soft landscaping. To the rear of the site, top of the screen here, is a terrace of 6 houses, arranged over 3 floors and with private gardens. As is laid out in the committee report, the proposed standard of accommodation for both commercial and residential occupiers is considered good. The proposed affordable workspace would be in 2 spaces at ground floor level of the Boris Building, seen hatched in green here. This represents 10% of the proposed office floor space and is located well within the site. The proposed first floor drawing shows the new internal floor to the Mission Chapel to the left. Each of the new and refurbished buildings would therefore have a first floor. The proposed second floor drawing shows that both the residential buildings and the new North Building C would have second floors. Extensive new basements are also proposed to house storage space in the Mission Chapel building and beneath the courtyard. Office space is provided within the North Building, which would be served by a light well, shown on the right here. In design and conservation terms, the proposal is considered acceptable for this conservation area location. The Boris Building and the Mission Chapel are important locally listed buildings located in a prominent location within the de Beauvoir conservation area. The reuse, repair and reinstatement of lost architectural features on these locally listed buildings for a considerable public benefit will ensure a sustainable long-term future and will result in an enhancement of the overall conservation area. The two buildings of significant heritage value are retained, and the courtyard element introduces a good amenity area to the heart of the site. The detailed design of the residential building seen here, and here to the left, is not yet fully realised. This is also felt to be the case for the dark brick commercial building to the right. We've recommended conditions to obtain full details of the architectural detailing and materials at the next stage. As such, the design of these buildings can be considered acceptable. The new buildings to the rear, and in particular those bordering de Beauvoir Square, will result in a degree of heritage harm as a result of the changes in massing. However, overall, the public benefits of the scheme, including the reuse and repair of these important non-designated heritage assets, is considered to outweigh this harm. The massing of the new buildings differs from the buildings currently existing on site, but as laid out in the committee report, setbacks have been used effectively, and it's considered that there would be no significant additional impact on the neighbouring occupiers in terms of daylight sunlight, outlook, or sense of enclosure. These elevations show the north building. As can be seen, there would be only opaque glazing on its rear elevation above ground floor level. The new buildings are generally laid out to be courtyard facing. Where new windows are proposed facing outward towards existing development, these are designed so that they would not have a significant impact on overlooking. Residential objections have referred to the restarting of an industrial use and the noise that commercial operations may bring. While an industrial use would not require planning permission in the existing buildings, the current permission provides an opportunity to soundproof and otherwise control the noise experienced by neighbours. The panel will have noted the detailed conditions in this regard, ensuring that noise is not audible at neighbouring residences. In transport terms, the scheme is also considered acceptable, as laid out in the committee report. Along with the separate residential and commercial cycle parking within the courtyard, the proposal would provide a blue badge space and 2 electric vehicle charging points in front of the building. So to conclude, the proposed application is considered to be policy compliant. It brings the 2 significant buildings on a locally listed site back into repair and productive use, while providing good quality commercial floor space and 6 new houses. In these and in other respects, the scheme is considered acceptable. It's recommended for approval subject to conditions and a legal agreement.
Thank you very much. Okay, over to Tommaso then, please. If you'd unmute yourself. I've got a stopwatch here. We've got 5 minutes, and I'll wave and otherwise try and indicate that when you've got 1 minute, and then you'll need to round up. So if you could start then now, please. Thank you.
So thank you, everybody, and good evening. Thank you for the opportunity of expressing my concern on the developments. So clearly, whilst it is recognized that the development offers a certain degree of additional employment space, which is much needed in Hackney, my key objection against this application being granted lies in the inaccurate information on which the current heritage statement is based. In particular, with regards to the impact of the proposal on the listed buildings to the north and to the settings of the conservation area. So the key problem here is that the assessment is based on a completely different massing and materiality of building C, which is the new build commercial building to which Nick was referring previously. As it is clear from point 5.1, page 24, the assessed massing of building C corresponds to a previous proposal consisting of a pitch roof geometry falling towards the gardens, more in keeping with the overall townscape quality of the conservation area, and with definitely less impact on overlooking than the proposed quite bulky flat roof block currently proposed for building C. And this, also as my experience as an architect, this is a critical and material difference in an important document of the application, especially as the profile of building C and its relation to the square and the neighboring properties is actually addressed specifically in the document, obviously on the different massing. So I find kind of surprising that the true impact of the proposed development for building C on listed buildings and conservation area is not considered thoroughly in the application, which could go ahead lacking what I consider a thorough visual analysis of the impact of its proposal on the square and its surroundings. As an example, and probably all of you know the square, I like to point out a key view, which is from the square, from the corner with Enfield Road and Peters Way, which are really the main urban connectors from key public transport nodes. And the bulk of the new massing from essentially where the tree is, I don't know if many of you know well the Beauvoir Square, but there is the tree there. It would be clearly visible from this angle, which also is an angle to the square. Really what could be considered an eyesore when compared to the high architectural quality of the neighboring listed buildings. In terms of materiality, Building C proposes to use at the moment a blue brick, which is clearly a debatable choice, especially in a context which makes of its fine brickwork one of its key features. The darkened glass, which is another feature which is really incompatible with the settings, and surprising that such a simplistic solution can be accepted as a remedy for the failure of the architectural composition to respond to the overlooking into the nearby properties. In a nutshell, it's not enough to darken a glass to respond to the feelings of being overlooked. And to put it simply, for my personal point of view, it is unacceptable that a major development in one of the key conservation areas in Hackney could simply go ahead with such an inaccurate heritage statement and a lack of general architectural merit in such an important corner. And so thank you. This was my intervention.
Thank you. Ahead of time. That's very good indeed. Just let me get a sense of the picture. Okay, so members, what we're going to do is we're going to go round and you can ask one or two questions. We will eventually exhaust your questions by keeping going round. But if we could just ask a couple at a time to start with, that would be good. So I'm going to ask Katie first. She's on my list first. Katie, do you have any questions?
Well, I wonder if the officer could comment on the suggestion that there are inaccuracies in the heritage statement. I won't summarise what the objector said, but there were several points he made.
I think essentially this application's been going for a long time. You'll notice that it's a 2010 application. There are aspects of certain bits of the documents that could be updated if necessary, but we can get the information that we require from the documents and consider on the basis of what we do have. So the heritage statement, for example, is very useful at the moment for telling us what's there, and we've assessed it partly on what's there on the basis of that document. What's changed subsequent to that is shown in the drawings that we have, and we're content that we have sufficient information to base our assessment on the other information that we have.
Thank you. And would you be able to comment on the points that were made about the blue brick and the darkened glass?
Yeah.
Are they still proposed?
Well, we feel that the application is sufficiently detailed to allow approval at this stage. We also have conditions on there to have a look at things like brick, for example, at the next stage. It might be instructive if I bring in Adam Dyer, who's the conservation officer, because this might be considered his remit as well. If you have any questions for me subsequent to that, let me know.
Please, Adam.
And can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. I think in terms of the heritage assessment, I mean, we have assessed it from a heritage perspective, looking at the latest drawings and then assessing the harm in relation to the conservation area, which in reality, from most views, is largely going to be hidden. It'll be kind of only visible on this kind of oblique view, looking from this corner of this kind of one single shot. And the massing, although it's slightly different to what was previously assessed or previously looked at in the heritage assessment, it's largely similar.
Well, it's a flat roof, instead of a pitched roof.
I know. You've had
sorry.
minutes. We now it's the turn of members to ask questions.
So in terms of the overall height and the overall impact is considered to be kind of similar and therefore considered to be acceptable. And in terms of the blue brick, I think we also kind of had some concerns about this, which is why we've conditioned for the full materials and kind of bricks at the next stage to kind of ensure that the CGI, we're happy with what we get.
Yeah, I have a completely different question, but I'm happy for you to come back round or to ask it now as you see fit.
Ask that.
Yeah. So the previous iteration of this scheme. I mean, like the officer, I've had a bit of trouble getting my head around the changes over the years. But at one point, there was a proposal to have parking in the courtyard, which has now been removed, which I would welcome. What I couldn't quite tell is if it was possible to get vehicular access to the courtyard, and if it is, whether we should condition that mustn't happen. Forgive me if you've covered this off and I've missed it.
No, good question.
Is it possible? It would be a squeeze with the plans that we've got. We've also got a condition that requires cycle parking internally. So I think that if you were to try, I'm just going to look at the plans here a second.
I mean, my suggestion would be if there's any possibility that someone could drive a vehicle into that courtyard, that we should condition that must not be allowed.
Yeah, I would say that there would have to be quite a lot of things changed on this ground floor plan to make it possible at all. But I can look at it again and do some measurements when we're not talking, and if it's necessary, then I can recommend it as a recommendation to the chair. But my feeling is that it's not going to be necessary, simply because it would be a stretch even looking at it here.
Thank you.
Can I just add something, Chair?
Sorry, who's that?
Yeah, it was Kasim, street scene. I was just going to add something there. I was just going to say that the proposed Section 278 highway work also removed the existing crossover, which would then obviously deter any vehicles crossing the footway.
Okay, thank you. Now, Susan, had you arrived before this item started?
No, Chair, it started before I arrived. So
okay, so
yeah, it started.
Okay, so I'll go on to Councillor Levy, please. Then you've got your blue badge space, Councillor Levy. We've managed to crack it.
Well, I'll get to that, Chair. I'll get to that. Can I just ask the officer? I'm just trying to get my head around the reduction or the removal of 3 4-bedroom dwellings by way of compensation. We've included 762 square feet of B1 and B2. I just wonder how that's arrived at. What kind of quid pro quo is that to lose 3 4-bedroom homes and instead put 762 square feet? And then it seems to me that 3 4-bedroom homes would, in any event, have a larger square area than square meterage than the 762 square feet. So I wonder what's happened to the remaining space, unless I'm totally wrong. But I think that's how come we've lost the homes and we've got more industrial instead of that.
There's a few questions in there. I think the first thing to note is that the 2010 scheme has never really been before me, and an applicant can put in what they want to put in. You have made a decision in the past on a scheme which is no longer proposed. So in no real sense has the home's been lost. It's not that there are homes on site and that they're being removed. As to whether there's a difference in floor space between the original proposal and this one, I can speak better as to the current proposal. I've measured it myself and it's accurate. I'm not entirely sure how it was measured the first time, but certainly you've got floor space figures that can be relied upon now.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I add?
Yes. Another one.
Thank you. I'm just on the headline page. It's just a small matter. It's that the visitor bicycle spaces are listed as 12, and that 6.6.18 is listed at 10. I just wondered which is the right one.
Let's have a look on the plans. Hang on. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and my screen's not being very helpful here. And a further, looks like at the front we've got 4, 6, and 6. Sorry, no. Yeah, 6 and 6, 12. Sorry about that.
Okay, not I'll just make sure. But that means that there's a total of 68 bicycle storage spaces for the residential and the commercial elements of this scheme. However, this is what Chancellor Stopps has got me before I even started. How come we've only got one space, one disabled parking space, when we've got 68 bicycle spaces? Are we, and these are for visitors, people coming in and out, for employees? I think we ought to do better than one. I think the catalyst here should be, I think, we understand that 2% of the borough's population are disabled, have disabilities. And if so, I think that should be reflected in schemes that rely upon mixed use. And I think we never hit that. We just put one in as a sort of face saving. Well, we have to put one in, so let's put one in. But I think one is insufficient.
Is that a question for, like, a specific question about this application? You think that it should
indeed. Why is there only one disabled space? There ought to be more than one.
Kazim, you can answer that, I think.
I can try, Chair. Thank you. So in this case, looking at the number of residential properties, we wouldn't normally recommend having a specific blue badge space for the residential element. However, we would recommend a space for the BUs. So we're looking at only a small number of units, residential units. So
why wouldn't we look at providing blue badge space for the residential units? Are we always assuming that the occupants are able to use public transport, and there are no disabled residents likely to occupy these premises?
I don't know, not at all, Councillor Levy. So if you think about perhaps you get 10 kind of planning applications on a single street, and if we were proposing to put in 1 or 2 blue badge spaces for each one of those application sites, all we would have is underutilized blue badge spaces. So in terms of proportion, if we were to over-provide blue badge spaces to such an extent, there would just be empty blue badge spaces, because the likelihood of, as you said, 2% of residents in Hackney have a disability, but the likelihood of those residents also owning a vehicle and also occupying the site in question means that the likelihood of those bays being occupied is very, very small. I'll just add on this. In this case, for example, the site is by removing 2 crossovers on the public highway. There is capacity perhaps to consider another bay. However, that's not normally a recommendation, because we're only looking at 6 residential units.
Yes, there is a formula, isn't there, Kazim, that we generally adopt in terms of provision of disabled bays. I think that's the. Can I?
Just as a postscript to this, I mean, the law has changed now that allows disabled residents to actually have a personalised disabled bay. And if any of the residents who were to move into this new scheme and to apply for a personalised bay, that in fact would disbar everybody else who was disabled from using it, including visitors to the commercial element or employees of that. So I think we ought to have a rethink about, what actually we're providing and how it's provided. Okay.
I think some of these questions are for the highways. We're not the Highways Authority, sadly. I wish we were. But in terms of the planning authority, I think that we need to provide a proportion of a certain proportion. We would ideally have it off street, and so to be on the site. But there's some good reasons why it shouldn't be off street. It should be on the carriageway instead of wasting space that could be better used in terms of courtyard, etc. So thank you for that question. I think we've got the answer.
Yeah.
We'll have the debate another time. Councillor Bell.
I'm broadly fairly content.
Okay.
Can I just check? Am I understanding correctly building D is in fact underground beneath the courtyard and only accessible through the Mission Hall building basement. Is that correct, Nick?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a light well entrance, but I think that the intention, I think, of that light well entrance is just for a fire escape rather than a proper entrance. So
refurbished use, yeah?
Sorry, I missed that because I started talking rudely.
It's linked as a use to the Mission Hall refurbished unit use.
Exactly. I think the applicant foresees that you'll have a single user at the ground floor and basement through there.
My only other comment was that the use of the B2 units, condition 38, is already quite restricted. And you were saying it's even more restricted by removing it on Sundays and bank holidays altogether.
Yeah, the reason for that is because that's what's actually applied for by the applicant. So the condition was, I think, just it was just wrongly worded. I was looking through the report again today, and I saw that it was worded to open it on Sundays, and I recalled that that wasn't actually what the applicant was applying for. So I just double checked that and just notified you that it would be changed.
Okay, it seems unnecessarily restrictive to me, but if that's what they want, that's fine.
You can debate that with the applicant, Brian.
Yeah, sure.
Councillor Potter. Anything?
My question is about accessibility for the residential units. I'm presuming access is via the metal gates. Is there any means of a vehicle getting there to help to facilitate loading and unloading at all? Is that actually part of the plan?
No, I don't believe so. It's not a long distance, and it's across like flat ground, so it wouldn't be problematic, I think, to get, for example, furniture through there.
Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. I want to question around the harm caused to the surrounding or the abutting conservation area. I note that obviously we think that the council thinks that the bringing the buildings back into use outweighs any not significant harm, but also that the design and the proposal enhances the local area. I just wondered, could you explain to me sort of what the balance is on that, and was it a fine balance? Because obviously, you know, the Vaux Prosper is a statutory listed conservation area. I think we should do our best to make sure that that status is retained and that the design of the area is kind of protected. So I'd just like to hear from possibly the heritage officer, Adam, some explanation around that, because you know it's obviously been a long process with this building, but it's also important to get it right, I think.
Before I bring Adam in,
sorry, Nick.
Sorry, what I was going to say, before I add him in, perhaps just if everybody would have a look in their pack as to the elevations, the ones I was showing earlier, because you'll see that because of the setbacks that are used, if you look on the sorry, somebody talking. If you look at the drawings that are provided, there will be dotted lines to show you the existing building, and so you'll see that the way that it relates to the original building is certainly something that we think is not outside of the bounds of the original massing. It's different, but it's similar in those senses. And I'll bring Adam in now.
So I guess we'll start with, let's say, the harm to the listed buildings. I guess the harm is caused through the kind of having a larger building in place of what is a smaller building at the moment. However, the harm is kind of mitigated as we are kind of pulling it 2.9 meters away from the boundary wall. Yes, the height is increasing. However, sorry, I've lost my point. I've just lost everyone. Yes, the height is increasing. However, we have to kind of think of the public benefits. We are getting the locally listed buildings back in use. We are restoring the front of these locally listed buildings. I mean, at the moment, in front of the Mission Hall, there is an electricity substation, which is part of this scheme we're removing and then reopening this up, which will kind of vastly improve its kind of relationship to the conservation area. In terms of the main kind of Boris Building at the moment, I'm not sure how well you know it, but if we look at it today, it's looking kind of in an increasingly sorry state, you know, with vandalism, graffiti on it, broken windows, broken glass. So having that building restored back to kind of how wonderful it was. I mean, I don't know if you looked at the heritage statement, we've got the original plans in there, and it shows quite what a grand and what an ornate building it once was, which has kind of fallen into disrepair. And so to that extent, having these locally listed buildings restored in such a way is a kind of quite a significant public benefit. And what we've got to the rear of the site, you know, in terms of the kind of really kind of dilapidated industrial buildings, having them removed and having higher quality architecture in terms of these residential units and the office building is a public benefit. And although there is some harm in terms of impact of the listed building, and that kind of one oblique view in terms of the conservation area, overarchingly, it's a positive kind of benefit. Well, there are positive benefits within it that outweigh that harm.
I mean, the alternative would, the alternative would be to completely refurbish the existing building, so we'd have a old-fashioned building instead of the new building. Is that right, Adam?
Well, I think actually, I don't know how far you've looked. In 2018, they submitted the structural assessment, kind of showing what was structurally sound on the site. And if we think about the main kind of sawtooth building in the centre that is quite pretty, it's almost structurally unsound now, where it's been allowed to fall into the state of disrepair. Water's kind of penetrated it and kind of rotted it, really. So the steels are, you know, they won't hold any weight. So the structural engineer, didn't condemn it, but at the same time did say that it's not economically kind of feasible to do anything with it.
So, Chair, do you mind if I
carry on, Sid?
Come back? I suppose my question is, yes, obviously bringing them back into use and making them fit for the future is a public benefit. I suppose the question is, could that not be done without the harm that is that we accept, even if it's not major harm, that we accept as being will be caused by this proposal? Was there any discussion with the applicant around that particular aspect and around the massing and the new roof, for example?
Yes, there were discussions. I mean, as you can tell with the new, there is a significant kind of step in. So that third floor is stepped in, which does help kind of reduce its overall massing. But at the end of the day, the harm is less than substantial, which then requires us to kind of weigh out this public benefit. And I'm sure Nick can talk about it, but our kind of view was at this stage, with the design kind of having evolved so far, that public benefit kind of outweighs that less than substantial harm.
I think it's worth noting that we decide the scheme that's before us and whether it's acceptable, and we think that this scheme is acceptable.
Okay, Chair, would you mind if I ask the objector, the resident, to provide some comments on that, and specifically around, obviously, I mean, I live not far away either, and I pass it quite a lot, so it is. I know that it is clearly in disrepair, but could the resident, or Tommaso, could you give a comment on what you've heard?
Thank you, Steve. And thank you, Adam. I think, you know, your comments are appreciated, but clearly, you know, I go back to what also Steve was saying. I mean, is notwithstanding the benefits, and you know, I'm really happy that the Boris Building gets renewed, but there is you know, I think especially on Building C, there is the opportunity, for example, of going back to the original proposal, which was you know, where a pitched roof there would both constitute a better material background, you know, because it was proposed in slate, which would definitely, you know, work better potentially in that location, rather than essentially a flat roof typology, of which there are very few around the area. So I'm surprised about that kind of choice. So going back to, you know, can we do it better? Well, you know, it seems to me that the original proposal would have been more in line with its context. Sorry.
And
Steve, do you want to direct that at Mr. Freeman?
Yes, I was going to say, we do have the applicant's agent, don't we? Mr. Freeman, would you comment on that? Oh, you're still on mute, I think.
Hello, can you hear that?
Yeah.
Well, firstly, with bringing back into use the existing building, it's not only a sawtooth roof. You've got another big roof at the back, and you've got a flat roof against the houses at Devovia Square. So we've pulled that building right back. We had a lot of negotiation with this, with Adam and the rest of the consultation team at the time. We originally had a pitch roof on it, you're quite right, but we were asked to take that back and put something more modern to replace it. And the same with the houses. We had a different set of houses on the original application, and we were asked to redesign that to make it more modern and something different to what was there. And hence, that's how these plans came about. But we felt we're pulling the building right back. And the only really view you're talking about is the view if you're standing on Devovia Square and you're looking through where there's a 8-foot high wall and you look back, it's covered in trees anyway. And if I've stood up there many times and taken a ladder to try and get a photograph, and I can't even get a photograph from that corner. So you've got to look really tight through the houses in Devovia Square to get any glimpse of the corner of that. And if you go back to the presentation drawings where the trees are shown all the way around the site, they cover most of that area anyway, and they're quite tall anyway. So I don't see there's any obstruction or any view or anything that's you're looking at that's obtrusive from the street or from anywhere. And from the courtyard with the modern look of the residential, I think this is very much in keeping. Yes, I know they objected to the blue brick, but they asked, the council at the time asked us to put in a different brick. We had London stocks throughout, and we were asked not to put in London stocks, but to change it to a different brick to contrast what was there and not to copy what was there. And hence this came about. But to put the existing building back into reuse, it would be unusable in any state because there's no ventilation. There's no lighting around the site. And what would one use it for? Storage, where you'd need trucks coming in then to, if you put it as an Amazon store or whatever, you'd need trucks coming in to load and offload, which would be a much higher intensity of traffic to the area. So I don't see that the building in its present use would be of any use to anybody. And given now with COVID, and even the office space we've got now, and people starting to work from home, I think that's going to change not only Hackney, but the whole of London. That's my personal view. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. Right, AJ, you don't have to ask anything, but you're very welcome to.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Vincent. It's just about the soundproofing. There's a condition for acceptance that it has soundproofing. You have to present the soundproofing report. But on page 22, there's a line that says, a further condition requires that the use of the proposed commercial building shall remain inaudible within neighbouring residential buildings. But it doesn't specify how that's going to be achieved. And I just wonder whether that should be built in or not. That's my question.
Yeah.
There's more than one condition. There's a condition requiring mechanical plant to be quiet, a soundproofing condition. There's another condition that requires that openable doors aren't opened after a certain time from the office areas, and that staff can't use the courtyard beyond a certain time. And then the condition that you're referring to is number 28. I think it's probably, sorry, I forget, but it's condition 28 anyway, 8.4.28, something like that. And that's where you require it to be essentially 10 dB below background noise level at neighbouring residences. It currently says inaudible, that condition. That's a simplified way of writing a condition that is standard when you're putting in something in residential buildings surrounding.
Okay, just to come back quickly. So I understand the condition, but we're not going to verify it after the building, after the business is up and running. We're not going to do any checks or any.
I think I got the end of that. So essentially, the soundproofing condition comes back. We check the soundproofing, but essentially, because a B2 use will be there, there was a question about whether it would not be a B2 use at one point. At the end, the applicant decides they want to have the option of a B2 use, whether or not that actually comes forward or not. So the condition is quite simple, and what it does is it means that you can test at any time and you can see whether or not it's going to be causing a noise nuisance at neighbouring properties. In this case, it's worded in the way to be inaudible in the way it is in the report. But essentially, the point to that is that you don't need to look at it coming in as a detail, and you can also check on it at any time in the future, rather than it being right at one point in time and then no longer being right at a later date.
Thanks.
Sorry, may I say it's already got industrial use. So if you used it for industrial use, you would have a worse sound than you've got getting.
Stephen, I have to treat both you and the objector in the same way.
Okay.
We are discussing it ourselves now, and we'll ask you when we need to ask you. Thank you very much. Right, so we've been round once. I'm going to hopefully go round and clear up any... Oh, Councillor Snell, why didn't I ask you? Councillor Snell.
I thought perhaps we'd fallen out and I didn't know about it.
I forgot here, I've got you crossed through.
Oh, I'm being too quiet. Okay, for two questions. First is for Adam. Because take me through this. We've kept quite a lot back on the new industrial building, which Tommaso is objecting to. And we've heard from the applicant that you in the past or your predecessors have argued them out of using stocks and talked about using a more distinctive style. Now, I understand that often from a heritage perspective, there is a view that if something's new, we should not try and ape the past. We should quite clearly make it new and basically set the context of what's new and what's old. So two things on this point. Number one, I should look at the condition, I haven't, but is the intention that these reserved matters will be decided by you, or will they come back to committee as the current recommendations sit? And number two, can you give us some idea of where you're going to be taking these changes? Are you going to stick with the idea of a distinctive blue-grey appearance, or are you looking for something that, what's your initial take on which way you'd like to change this?
Correct. I think the advice that we gave initially was that the applicant should look at the local area and then come back to us having examined the area and looked at what are the predominant materials. And then they were going to come in and suggest something based on what they've found. They've suggested engineering brick. Our kind of justification was how does this link in? However, in the end, we were mainly arguing about the massing, knowing that materials can be agreed at this stage or as a condition. Our thing was to get the massing and the proportions right before we kind of move on. And it was the blue bricks that came forward as the applicant's choice. We're still not 100% convinced by it, and so we've left this open for discussion now, and I guess we could take it back to committee, but I think the intention is for it to be done by the delegated authority at a later date.
That's correct.
Second question, Peter.
And the second question, probably to Nick. I looked at the biodiversity comments that you put in, and just take me through this. The Hackney Swift Society made a comment of asking for a pre-survey of what was on the site in terms of bat and bird nests. And quite honestly, it often is these types of semi-derelict sites that have the greatest number of sparrow nests and everything else. So I just wondered how that concern from the Hackney Swift Society has been addressed within the planning process.
Well, it's necessary. It's not actually allowed for you to disturb roosting birds or bats. So if they turn up, that will be sorted by other legislation. In terms of this building itself, we've put in bird and bat nesting boxes or bricks, depending on what is considered most appropriate. And so it will continue to house those creatures at a later date. But you're right, there could be creatures in there at the moment, and that would be something that would be sorted out by separate legislation.
Thank you. Okay, I think we've been almost everywhere now. Has anybody else got any additional questions? So I've just got, Councillor Potter. Councillor Potter?
Thank you, Councillor Stopes. I was just having a look on page 26 on the section on sustainability, and it talks about the London Plan policy encouraging retrofitting measures to existing buildings. And I wondered what plans Stephen Freeman are in place to provide energy efficiency as far as the retrofitting is concerned.
Hello. Well, in terms of whatever's been asked for by the council, we've provided. In terms of photocells on the roof, etc., we've put in, and everything will meet building control. And as we said, with sound attenuation, more than the fit out, I can't give you any detail of that yet because I don't know who's going to take out the space.
Okay.
Can I just ask a bit further, Vincent, to our planning officers?
Yes.
What kind of advice are you giving to the developer in terms of retrofitting? I mean, obviously solar panels isn't retrofitting, so what kind of materials do you encourage developers to use?
Well, this is not something that's dealt with by the conditions that we have, but the new buildings on site will be designed in such a way as to be BREEAM compliant. We've got a payment in lieu towards the carbon offsetting there. There's a sustainability document that's been supplied as part of the application. And in terms of retrofitting itself, we'll be looking at the materials and everything that come in at the next stage. And we'll be able to have a look at whether, for example, the windows are considered to be acceptable at that time.
I'm more kind of interested in the treatment to the walls, you know, so you've obviously got walls that presumably have got quite a high mass, but how do you retain the heat in those walls? What kind of additional layers do you advise are added to kind of make that a more thermally comfortable space?
When you're dealing with locally listed buildings like this, there's obviously balance to be found. There's soundproofing that's going to have to go in as well. So we'll be looking at that stage, because these older buildings that are retained are going to be essentially covered internally to make them soundproof. So at that stage, we'll be having a look at it. But yeah, because they're locally listed and they're heritage buildings with thick walls, we're going to have to want to find the balance between what's good for the listed building and what's thermally efficient. What we have in the sustainability document is a baseline where we have, for example, payment in lieu for carbon offsetting. Our sustainability officer has looked at it and is convinced that it is acceptable for this proposal.
Thank you. Peter, I think you had one.
Well, a comment on that. If even with existing buildings, if 50% or more of one element is changed, then it has to be brought up to current building regulation standards, which are much higher than when this was built. So we should see substantial gains anyway, even on the buildings that are being remodeled, as long as we follow proper building control rules. I just wanted to say, Chair, I didn't want to miss the opportunity. I think I'd like the reserved matter on the appearance of this new commercial building to be brought back to committee, because whilst I think it's valid to look for the local building style and look at something appropriate, at the moment, you know, it's completely different to have a blue brick building and you know, I'd just like that to come back to committee for us to go. Normally I like to leave this to officers, but I think we're not being given any sort of a clear guide on this, and we should ask for that element to come back to committee.
Okay. Has everybody had their say? I think that I'm really pleased with this. I mean, it's been around for a long time, and who knows whether it's going to get built out. It is only, Steve, it is clearly a conservation area, but it's only a locally listed building, so our hand is not as strong as one would want it to be. And to take that substation off the front and do all the good stuff that we've heard about is fabulous. I'm a big supporter of having a new building look like a new building if it is a new building, and that goes back to sort of ex-councillor Bill Hodgson's days as chair of the committee. So I'm really thrilled about this. I really hope Mr. Freeman will be telling us when they're going to start work on the site at the end of it. But I have one question to ask. I mean, everybody's exhausted my question, which I'm surprised about, and that is of Krasin. You know, we've got a conservation area that is second, I think, to none, and you're going to put electric vehicle charging bollards on the footway, aren't you? Now, some of this stuff I've seen is absolutely awful, and it halves the width of the footway. So how can we control you guys from sticking great big telephone boxes worth of electric vehicle charging stuff on the footway in this, what is a beautiful conservation area? I'm asking in hope rather than expectation.
Hopefully we won't let you down. So it's a very, very valid question, and you'll note that in the kind of recent few months or a couple of years, we haven't really been putting any EV charge points on the footways or even in the carriageways. And what we're working on is an EV strategy for the whole borough. And part of that strategy will look at how we can best deliver these EV charge points and footway widths and you know, kind of trip hazards and all the rest of it, other things that we are considering. So we would like to get to a point where we can have build outs in the carriageway to deliver some of these EV charge points. I know that's what you wanted to hear.
I wonder whether that would be the thing that I would have brought back to the committee. You know, I mean, Nick, can we strike that request off for EV charging on the footway? Stop doing it unless they want to pay for it.
Well, it's in our hands ourselves, isn't it? So we've got the highways works there, so we can do it to the best of our ability. And I think
it's just the wording, Nick.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's put that condition back to come back with Peters, and we'll be able to have another go at what on earth you're going to put in front of there. But with that said, we've agreed that they will come back, and although Peter, part of the reason I asked developments to come back with the materials is when I think the building is pretty bland and is on the public highway. This is, you know, as the gentleman said, you know, it's pretty tricky to see all this brick. But if you want to see it, it's a good principle to take an interest in it. So I'm happy to support that. AJ.
Just a quick query. If it's coming back to committee, on page 67, they've got was it the window? Where is that saying? Yeah, St. Peter's Mission. At the moment, it's proposed to board it up with bricks or something, and they said they're going to submit new plans. So can we see those if it's along with Peter's, if it's coming back to see what it looks like?
Adam,
on page 67.
That makes sense.
Let me have a look at page 67. Where's that? Is this a materials condition by any chance? Oh, hang on. Page 67 is actually, it's the old committee report. So we've put as Appendix B, I think it's B, the old committee report, which is for your benefit. So you can see what happened last time, but actually seems to have confused a lot of people. So I wouldn't worry about page 67 in terms of this application necessarily. Can I just say, while I'm not talking over anyone, the electric vehicle charging points are a header term for the legal agreement, not a condition. So we can just word the head of terms as would be appropriate and put that to you as a recommendation C. That's something that we can do really quickly.
Let's do that. Recommendation C, and I'll consider it. Yeah. Okay. Any more questions? I don't think we have any. Thank you, AJ. You're walking in Councillor Butikamp's footsteps. He was a great reader of all the conditions, so well done. Do keep going on that.
Can I just ask one final question?
Who's that? Oh, Councillor Levy. Yes, of course you can.
Thank you. It's regarding waste storage and collection. Now, my understanding is that there's been no vehicle access into the site, and I'm just trying to understand what this means. That's a location on page 26 on 6.8.2. the location of the refuse stores is within the entryway to be carved through the ground floor level of the Boris Building. How does that look? Carved out, what does that mean?
Do you want me to show you? I can present briefly the ground floor plan if that's helpful.
Thank you. Not helpful to me. It's a damn nuisance. The screen doesn't work.
Oh.
So, can you see where I'm waving the cursor here?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So that's the residential and commercial stores, and this is the bit that's carved out through the bottom of the building. So you can see it's not.
I can't see it. I can see a very small box with a plan.
Okay.
So you've got green at the top, the bottom right, and red at the top left.
Yeah. So the green bit here has carved out a bit, like a little square in the corner, and those are the two refuse stores. And this one I'm waving here, that's the entrance and the road. Yeah. So you can see that the drag distance isn't that far through the centre of the building, and our refuse people are happy with that. So.
But doesn't that mean the residential element is located well away from that? It means that residents have got to, I don't know how far they've got to actually transport their refuse to get to that point. It seems the most farthest away point that it could possibly be.
Well, it's a square, so it's difficult to know where else in the square would be closer, sort of by definition. But it's I think, a perfectly reasonable place, and then would be easy for them to again put it out. It's the fact that the residential buildings are to the rear of the site. So if the refuse is going to get from the residential buildings to the front of the site, it's got to go through the square in a short distance. So it seems sensible to me anyway.
Okay. Right. And then from there to the footway the roadway where the refuse trucks can pick it up.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they'll be wheeled out, I take it.
Well, yeah, those will be wheelie bins, I think.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so I think we know what we've got now. We're going to move to a vote. We're going to do something that our Parliament is unable to do, it seems. So what we're going to do is I'm going to call for a vote, and we're all going to put our hands up, and then I'm going to go round and you're going to say for or against. Like we did it last time, it worked. Does everybody understand that? So we're all going to stick our hands up and hold our hands up until we've told the legal officer and Gareth which way we're voting for. We've got one condition, and that is that Peters, the brick and the elevation perhaps the brick choice comes back, and we've got that the electric vehicle charging stuff is going to go in a recommendation C. So we'll have a little bit of extra time to think about that, not much, though I suspect. So the recommendation is to...
Okay, you've got a hand up before that. Councillor Potter, did you want to say something?
Councillor Potter.
She's muted.
Councillor Potter, you need to press the button.
Yeah, I know. Apologies. It just takes a while to come up on the screen. If it is coming back, can we have more details on the retrofitting measures and how the decision is made in terms of the balance between the listed building, etc.? I'd just like more details on that, please, if it is coming back.
Nick, is that a planning issue?
I think that's something that we agreed would be building control, but I don't think that there's any decision for this to come back, is there? The decision that needs to be made is whether the condition comes back at a later time.
Is there a condition associated with the
materials? Yes, there is.
Installation of the walls?
No, there isn't.
So that's a building control condition.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and we're happy with the sustainability as set out in the sustainability document and reviewed by our sustainability officer.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So the recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to a 106. So that was.
Sorry, let me take the presentation down. I forgot to do that. Well, according to this, it is done.
And is there a listed building consent as well? Something to do?
Yes, there is. That's the second recommendation.
So where's the second recommendation?
It's underneath. It's under at the bottom of, it's recommendation A again, but it's at the bottom of the other one. So you've got to go down to about number 38 before you get to the second recommendation A.
So we'll do one at a time, officers, or both at a time? Tom, do we do both recommendations?
I think we can do both separately.
Separately, okay. So I'll do the first is the General Planning Permission. All those in favour, please show. Right, so I'm in favour. Councillor Hanson?
In favour.
Councillor Levy?
In favour.
Bell?
In favour.
Snell?
In favour.
Potter?
In favour.
Race?
In favour.
And Shuhan?
In favour.
So that's all of us. Thank you very much. Listed building consent. I think that's to do with the wall, actually, isn't it?
That's right.
So all those in favour, please show. Stops is in favour. Hanson?
In favour.
Levy?
In favour.
Bell?
In favour.
Snell?
In favour.
Potter?
In favour.
Race?
In favour.
And Shohan?
In favour.
Okay, thank you. That's unanimous as well. Did you get all those, Gareth?
I can confirm that I've got down all those votes.
Thank
For
you
both-
very
for
much,
both.
everybody, and we look forward to seeing that substation off the front of that building. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Thank you very much. So the next one is item 6, land at Leaside Road. Yvette, we've got Yvette.
Yeah.
So I've got Yvette, Peter Kelly as the Urban Design Officer. Peter, are you coming in? Kazim, Luciana, the substitute, Natalie, Graham, Rob this time, Graham and Rob. I've got Israel Gold and John Leach as the applicant. Are they in the room? Israel, can I see you? Israel, if you put your camera on, that would help me. Thank you.
I am.
And John Leach. Is John Leach here?
John is on there. John, your camera appears to be. You need to realign your camera, John.
Your camera's upside down.
Yeah,
I'm having some. Yeah,
that's what I meant.
Sorry. I might just leave and actually try and come back again.
Okay.
And see if that works. Okay, thank you.
And I think, apologies, Chair, and I think Luke is also there just to answer any questions. Luke, yeah. Hello,
Okay.
Luke.
So we've got John Leach, who is outside at the moment because he's embarrassingly upside down. Well, here he is, he's coming back.
Luke's here.
Hello, Luke.
John, you're the right way.
And John's back now.
Okay. Okay, I think that's about it then. That's right. Okay, nice to see you, John. Okay, over to Yvette, please, then.
Can you see my screen already?
Yes, sort of, yes.
Yeah. So
Yvette, just to make you know, some of us can only see it as one little small box. So if there's some fine detail, you might have to tell us about it.
okay. Okay, so application 2019-1670 for land at Leaside Road. So the application is for the demolition of the existing car park to provide a 7-storey building comprising 22 residential units and 969 square metres of commercial floor space at ground first and park second floor. So this is the site. This is the location plan. So the site is here in red. So you can see it's located on the south side of Leaside Road, which is here. And then this is Thaden Road along here. So it's directly adjacent to the railway line, which goes along there. The River Lee is just over here, and then Walthamstow Marsh is beyond. The site is located within the Thaden Road PEA. So that's an aerial view of the site. So it's here, currently a car park. So you can see this is the PEA, the Priority Employment Area. It's very industrial in nature. These are just sort of warehouse buildings of between 2 and 5 stories generally. And then there are residential buildings surrounding the PEA, so down here and over here on the other side of the railway line. And then these are newer build mixed use and residential developments along the riverfront. These are generally of up to about 6 stories. That's a closer view of the existing site. So it's this split level car park. The site slopes down from the back to the front. So the back of the site is about 5.5 meters higher than the front. Now some photos, that's the front of the existing site from Leaside Road. Then looking east towards the railway bridge, so that's the site here on the left, that's Prince Wharf there on the right. And then looking the other way, this is the site just here, and then the industrial building next door. And then this is the site from the top level of the car park. So this is the top level of the site, and then you can see some of these newer mixed-use buildings along the waterfront beyond. So the plans. So the proposal is for the construction of a 7-story building for 22 residential units with commercial space on the ground first and part second floor. So this is the ground floor plan. Office space on the ground floor, and then the main residential entrance is also here on the ground floor from Leaside Road. First floor plan, more workspace.
I am. I'm afraid. Can you hear me?
We can.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, carry on, Yvette.
Yeah. Affordable workspace. Well, this is workspace again on the first floor, and I will explain here that all of the floor space, all the commercial floor space in this scheme is affordable. So there's just under 1,000 square meters of affordable workspace, and it will all be provided at 60% of market rent, which is beyond the policy requirements. So second floor plan, more commercial space at the back here, and the main commercial entrance at the back from Grosvenor Way. Then residential units at the front here, and then there's also a children's outdoor play area on this terrace here on the second floor, and then an indoor playroom, children's playroom. And then typical floor plans for the next, the 3rd to 6th floor. So 5 flats per floor. The units are aimed at the local Jewish community, so they've got features like dual kitchens and then bigger balconies that offer unobstructed views of the sky. So in total there are 7 3-bed units, so that's 1/3 family sized. There are 14 2-beds and just 1 1-bed, which is an acceptable mix. The quality of the accommodation is acceptable too. This is the green roof on top floor, so accessible in the middle and then more intensive green roof around the edge. There's also access to the river towpath on the other side of Leaside Road through one of the developments on the other side of the road, so residents do have adequate access to amenity space. These are the CPIs, so that's the view from under the bridge, under the railway bridge. So this is the site here on the right, so you can see some of the materials and design here. So it's a sort of, you can see this double height brick arches at the bottom to maintain an active frontage along there. And then the view from the corner of Leaside Road and Faden Road. So that's the site there. The view from the other side of the railway. And then a long distance view, oh no, that's the back view from, so that'll be the commercial entrance there. So that's from Grosvenor Way. And then a long distance view from Walthamstow Marshes. That's the site in the back there. So overall, the scale, massing and architectural detail of the scheme is considered to be acceptable and appropriate to its context. There are modest daylight and sunlight impacts on properties opposite, but overall amenity impacts are acceptable. I have to point out that there is no affordable housing proposed as part of this scheme. So there was a viability assessment which was assessed, and any surplus that was identified was put towards improving the affordable workspace offer. And the outcome we've got is a proposal for 100% affordable workspace at 60% of market rent, which is considered to be a good outcome in this PEA location. and the scheme is recommended for approval.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got Israel and John down to speak. Are you both going to say a couple of minutes worth? John, are you speaking? You need to unmute yourself, John.
Sorry, thank you.
Israel, could you unmute yourself?
Yes,
Are you
can
going to
hear me?
share 5 minutes, you two?
That's correct. I'll do the start and hand over to John, so we should both be unmuted and we'll go through it.
Okay, over to you then, Israel.
Good evening, members. My name is Israel Gold, and I represent the applicant and its development manager. I'm going to give you a broad overview of the applicant and development proposal here, and then I'll hand over to John Beach from KL Architects to explain the design process around the application scheme. The company owns and operates numerous built-to-rent flats and various commercial premises across Hackney and the rest of Greater London, and will continually develop and improve the business assets. The application site is essentially leftover land at the interface between our Grosvenor Way industrial estate and the new residential developments opposite, springing up along this stretch of the River Lee. Consequently, we have developed a mixed-use scheme comprising of both commercial floor space to be wholly kept at 60% of market rent, as well as 22 new built-to-rent flats, which complements this interface of uses. In addition to meeting the usual residential policy requirements, we have designed the flats to meet the specific requirements of the local Jewish community, for which there is significant latent demand. Such requirements have been addressed through 1, providing a larger communal baggy store, 2, delivering a mix comprising of larger 2 and 3 bedroom units, 3, designing larger kitchens to enable the separation of meaty from milky foods, 4, staggering private balconies so that each has uninterrupted views to the sky to enable their use for the Jewish festival of Sukkot, 5, oversizing the communal play areas, a rooftop garden, outside space on the second floor, adjoined by an indoor playroom and sitting area for parents to watch their children while playing. Incorporating these design requirements whilst optimizing the development of the site is the combination of a thorough pre-application process with your officers, who I personally wish to thank for their positive approach throughout. It is a testament to this rigorous design process that the scheme has received a significant majority of support from local representations. So to summarize, we believe this to be the first development in Stamford to be fully purpose-built for the Jewish community, offering these enhanced facilities and providing a real step forward for the borough in terms of adding to its quality new housing stock. Like us, we hope that this is something that the council would be able to take great pride in. Thank you for listening. I shall now hand over to John Leach.
Thank you.
Thank you, Israel. As Israel mentioned, the design you see before you is the result of a collaboration between Hackney and the team. There's been many improvements along the way, and I hope you'll agree that we've arrived at a highly crafted and rich building as a result. We were very excited by the idea of making a building that could address the specific needs of the Orthodox Jewish community, while at the same time reflecting their cultural traditions back to the city in a built form. It's a complex site, and the building must speak to many contexts. The raised ground of Grosvenor Way, the valley-like quality of Leaside Road, the railway line, the river, and the marshes. So we read the raised ground of Grosvenor Way, the eroded rock-like fingers of Mountside Walk, the quarry-like quality of the pocket of land formed by the retaining walls around the site as geological features. And so we began to imagine the building as a rock nestled into its site. And so we looked to examples in architectural culture of interventions in natural rock formations and how this might inform the design. Openings for light and air are cut informally where they are needed, and they're left unadorned. And when openings have a symbolic purpose, they're formal and elaborated, and so they simultaneously express both informal and formal approaches to composition. With this in mind, we've composed the elevations in the classical tripartite form of base, middle, and capital. The base, the commercial element, is formed as a series of tapering arches responding to the scale of the railway bridge, addressing the street in a welcoming way and creating much needed active frontage in that area. The middle residential section is informal and domestic in scale. Its shifting window positions are a result of the need to arrange the plan in such a way as to ensure that each of the balconies has an uninterrupted view of the sky for use during the Sukkot festival, while also perhaps describing the lively energy of family life within. The capital is formal, increased in scale, and intended as a generous civic gesture. The building is crowned with a sinuous rooftop playground, which from afar evokes a cluster of trees. Flush pointed brick is the main material employed, with a rough texture on the lower floors transitioning to a smoother texture above. Windows and railings are painted to reflect the honey tones of the brickwork, which creates the overall perception of a homogeneous structure. We hope that we've designed a welcoming and richly contextual building, which allows the freedom of multiple readings, and one which will make a high quality contribution to Hackney's building stock. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now to questions. If I can just start with Peter. Peter, hang on. Peter, the height issue there down that particular street, a lot of low-rise factory units, essentially, with a new set of blocks of flats opposite. This is 7 stories, so it's pushing it a bit further. I wonder what the issues were around your assessment of the height and how it fits into that, what is a low-rise area.
Thank you, Councillor Stopps. Peter Kelly, Design Officer. The emerging heights in the buildings opposite, which are currently built along the canal frontage and under construction, range between 5 and 6.5 stories. So the building directly opposite to the north is 6 full stories and 1 setback up story, making it essentially the same height as the proposal. We felt that because partly the site is on a hillside, so we were happy with the idea of the building stepping up very slightly in line with the change of topography as we rise up the hillside. We also felt that the building sat comfortably within the emerging residential scale of the area.
Okay, thank you. Members, please. Katie.
Nothing immediately, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Fajana Thomas. Susan, where are you? Here we are.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and the first one is the 4.8, the high level of theft and burglary-related crime, that aspect. I'm coming across of this for the first time in our planning submission. I would like if you can tell me more about this, in particular in relation to the recommendation on this. That is the first one. And the second question is 4.18, the comment from Network Rail about having an agreement. I want to find out, is that request a planning material? If yes, how have you addressed this with the recommendations? Thank you.
Yvette, please.
Yeah, so the first one about designing out crime. So yeah, we got a representation from the designing out crime officer, from the Metropolitan Police officer, just highlighting that there is crime in the area, and they've sent through a whole bunch of recommendations for how that could be mitigated. It's mainly to do with security on windows and doors and that sort of thing. And the architects have met with the designing out crime officer and they've discussed it, and there's a condition where everything will be addressed by condition, basically. Nothing that has been suggested is unachievable with the design that we've got.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. What I want to know about that is, what if tomorrow, like I said, this is the first time, I might have missed if this has come to us in the past. If any developer or when any other development in the borough, if there is a comment of this, would that be taken into consideration and such recommendation be made, including social housing, houses that are Hackney housing development as well?
So that's a general question about designing out crime, isn't it? I wonder if Natalie can just tell us. We do have it, but not always. Natalie, tell us about designing out crime, please.
Yeah, so that it is a material planning consideration. So it is something that we would consider and take into account. And I think this is a good example where we have been able to speak to the architect, and amendments have been able to be made. I noticed, Rob, did you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, just to say that this is common practice. We do it for we do it for every major application. We liaise with our colleagues in the Metropolitan Police, the design out crime officers, and the usual way for it to be addressed is that the development has to secure a sort of accreditation. They get like a certificate sort of saying they've met the standards of design out crime, because a lot of it depends on sort of details like the window fittings that are used, which go beyond the sort of level of detail we would normally look at for a planning application. But it's standard. We do it on every major application.
Thank you. Councillor Levy, Michael.
My second question, Chair.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, the second question was about making an agreement.
Network Rail, yes.
Yeah, there's lots of conditions that Network Rail have suggested, and they've all been put in. One of them was, making an agreement. Hang on, let me just check. Paragraph 4.18. Contacting the asset protection team.
That is the one. Is that a planning material? And if yes, why have we not addressed it with recommendations?
Yeah, there's various conditions where the applicant needs to liaise with the asset protection team at Network Rail, and they will do that.
If I can just add here, that this is also standard where a development was within like 5 or 10 meters of an existing railway line or an underground railway line, that they need to contact because it's about how the development is actually carried out as much as like the development itself. So you're not allowed to have cranes overhanging the railway, those sorts of things. So it's really for the developer, as the development is being carried out, to contact the asset protection team from London Overground and Network Rail. So usually it's just a condition that we attach to the plan permission requiring that to be done.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Levy. It's in your ward, isn't it?
No, Chair, it isn't actually.
Oh.
Just beyond. No, I think it's in Lee Bridge. Or at least it says it's in Lee Bridge.
You should know.
It's got me thinking now. I'm not. I think probably that it's probably into Lee Bridge. It goes sort of it's right at the bottom end of Leeside.
Okay.
I suspect it's not. Anyway, I'm sorry to have to bang on about this again, but I notice and I welcome on 6.2.21, page 91, that the developers are actually putting in or proposed to put in 5 fully DDA compliant wheelchair use dwellings, which I think it's that's to be applauded. But again, from the Hackney perspective, we've put a perfunctory 1 blue space out there for those potential 5 users. How can we square that up? It doesn't sit right.
So, Kazim, go through the process again, please.
So, I think the short answer to this is that there is an assumption on your part, perhaps, that 5 of those occupants are likely to be disabled drivers and all would own and operate a private vehicle. So I think from the outset, there is a blue badge bay being made available on the public highway. If any need becomes available, it's council policy to consider all applications and provide a personalized blue badge bay as close as possible to the front door of a disabled occupant regardless. So this is just putting in a single bay as the policy requires from the outset, but it doesn't stop any disabled resident who needs to own and operate a private vehicle to request an additional bay. That's just the council policy.
I don't think it's right. It's correct policy. I think it's not for now, but the fact is we are developing new residential sites because we recognise that there are disabled people and they have specific transport needs, and we ought to be recognising that in a better way than we are doing. That's my point.
Can we ask Kazim to talk to his colleague Mr. Bean and let us and come back to us and tell us in the generality what sort of scale of demand there is in Hackney in terms of blue badge holders in these sorts of flats. Would you be able to do that, Kazim?
Be useful, yes.
Yeah, sure.
Some
historic
sort of evidence as to whether you're getting it right or not, whether there's a particular need.
Yeah.
Councillor Bell.
Just one small thing. I noticed condition 15 on page 108, and it's a list of trees which are permitted and trees which are not permitted on the site. And I'm not sure I noticed this ever having done this before. Is it something we plan to do regularly?
No, it was just that's a condition that was requested by Network Rail because of the fact that the development is right next to the railway. So they don't want any types of whatever that's going to grow like huge next to the railway or whatever. So, yeah.
So we have checked this list and are happy with the horticultural elements? No.
I didn't check the horticultural element. I will check the horticultural elements before I finalise the decision.
It could be a precedent we might want to use somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay.
They don't want London planes there. So in 100 years time,
they're banned, Vincent.
They've got to deal with them. Okay, that's a good point. Spotted. Sorry?
You can't have a small leave line, but you have a big leave line.
Councillor Snell.
I did really appreciate the architectural description from Mr. Leach. I'd just like to know a little bit more from you or one of the, or Yvette, I guess, exactly what the external appearance is, because too often things that look wonderful on drawings don't look wonderful in practice. Is this simply perhaps I should have read more carefully, is this a render finish? What happens if, along with the graffiti that covers Hackney Wick at the moment starts moving up the canal, and we end up with loads of people with spray cans going over those lovely white structures and putting their own images on them? How are we going to stop that happening?
Okay, I'm going to let Peter answer the question about the details of the materials.
We don't have render, do we?
No, there's no render proposed. So the building is proposed to be built from a brick, a high quality brick called Sexton Fiesta brick by BEA. And I've had a look at it. It looks to be a quality brick. But we do have the usual conditions, which are to ensure that the finished building resembles as closely as possible the townscape visual the townscape images that you will have seen. So there'll be continuing work with the architect to sort of ensure a high quality finish.
But I mean, are we giving any thought to this issue of the level of tagging and the level of graffiti? I mean, I look at what are called, I think, the Dutch loft buildings along Dalston Lane, which were hated locally at the time. But they did end up with, you know, glazed bricks that have stood up very well to graffiti, and they're easy to clean off. But I wonder if we should be looking to apply that more widely.
Well, the architect has proposed a white glazed brick around the residential entrance, so that area, I assume, will be very easy to maintain. Maybe the architect could come in and give a little bit more information.
Thank you, John. So you're giving me a bit of an opportunity for graffiti, Councillor Snell thinks.
So I'd welcome Mr. Leach's views on these.
Hi there, thank you. We've chosen quite a pale cream-coloured brick, it is true, and I suppose in terms of the exposure, it would really only be at ground level, which is it's got a high level of openings on it, and one would hope that the sort of surveillance in the area and also just the activity around the area would sort of prevent that. There is commercially available coatings that you can put on brickwork, which creates a film on the brickwork and an impervious layer essentially, which prevents any sort of spray paint penetrating through to the brickwork, and it can be just cleaned off fairly easily. So that's something that we could add as part of the condition, absolutely.
Councillor Snell is sensitive to this because his ward is Dalston, and he's got that building next to the station. It has been pretty badly tagged, hasn't it? So it does happen. Whether it'll happen on Leaside Road, I suspect less of a target. But yes, can we think about it, please? Councillor Potter?
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask a question about affordability. I very much welcome the 60% affordable workspace. I notice on page 889, when you compare to some other similar schemes, you've got more of a you've got schemes which have both affordable workspace and also affordable housing. Did you ever consider having a mixture of both? Just like to you to explain a little bit more on your rationale for this.
Yeah. So on the latest version of the viability assessment, what we found was a £600,000 surplus, and that would have been enough to get a really good affordable workspace offer in this priority employment location, or to get a few sort of intermediate units. And we just decided, well, the priority in this location is for good affordable workspace, and this is a good affordable workspace offer. And we just thought it was, from a planning point of view, it's the best outcome for this site.
And if I can just add, the other schemes nearby which have achieved both affordable workspace and affordable housing are larger schemes where the economics are different. They deliver more housing, therefore there's more of an opportunity to get some, affordable housing in there. But in all of them, I think it's fair to say that all of the affordable housing offers are quite low compared to other sort of wholly residential schemes. You're talking like a few intermediate units, which are not to be sniffed at. There's value in achieving all the affordable housing that we can. But in this instance, it was felt better that rather than getting a couple of intermediate units in the scheme, it's better to go all out, especially as it's within the, more of the heart of the employment zone, to go all out and deliver a really good employment offer, which is why we took the course of action we did.
Thank you. Councillor Race.
Thank you, Chair. Just two questions. I think the first one's covered off, but just in terms of the roof planting, are we determined to make sure it's sort of as substantial and not perfunctory as possible on the roof where possible? The second question I have is probably half specific to this site and then half educational for me. But when I look at we saw on the screen, the back aspect of the building, looking out over what I think remains car parking and light industrial. Where does the boundary lie with the sort of space to the back, and is there any chance that in the future that land is developed and the sunlight will be blocked off completely by any development at the back? because we've had one of these cases before, haven't we, Chair, with warehouse and around sort of London fields, whereby the windows were very clearly going to be blocked by from sunlight at some point in the future, and it raised kind of issues in the later planning application.
Good question.
Yeah. So the first one on the green roof, yeah, we've got a detailed condition requiring all the details of what the green roof will look like. And the second one, I'm going to get the plan back up on the screen.
Thanks.
So this is the back view. Is this the one you were thinking of?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a gap. Oh, I can't remember how big the distance is between. What was it? I want to say it was about a 15-metre gap between the back of this building and the front of, or the back of the proposed building, and the commercial unit behind. And all of this land behind is owned by the applicant. So,
right, okay.
In theory, it could be developed in the future, but yeah.
Okay, that sort of answers my question. I think if it's owned by the applicant, then obviously, until it's, that's fine. Thank you.
Is that land roadway around the corner then, or
that Grosvenor Avenue at the back? Oh, and
the gap between the tin sheds and the building, is that roadway, or that's land owned by the developer?
It's land owned by the developer. Do you want to explain, Israel? Or
I think it is public highway though. You can access it easily enough, but it's access for all the industrial units. Whether it's, I think it may be privately owned public highway.
Israel.
It's the car park from Grosvenor Way, so it's all one land. It's not on the public highway. There's no through road from Grosvenor Way to Leaside Road, so it's all owned within the same ownership. It's all one parcel of land.
So the road could be obliterated, could it?
It's not a road, it's car park spaces. There's no road. The entrance to the industrial estate is only via the entrance from Grosvenor Way and back out from that way. There's no road linking Leaside with Grosvenor Way at the moment.
Okay, is Grosvenor Way a private road or public highway?
Correct. Private road, private ownership land.
Okay, so it's a sort of just a industrial estate access, really.
Correct. It's a freehold industrial estate.
So the access will be maintained because you own it, I guess, and you'll establish access. Okay, I'm going to ask a question about some of those buildings later, but so it's good to know that you own them. Steve, did you have a second one?
No, they were both answered. That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Shuhan.
Yeah, just on page 110, there's a soundproofed again. Sorry about this. They said the commercial units are the residential units are soundproofed from the commercial units. But are the residential units soundproofed from the railway train going past, and also any vibrations or anything? Have you taken those into account from the railway trains?
yeah, there is possibly one of the conditions. The conditions is not worded that well. We did take into account the vibrations and noise from the trains, but we may need to reword one of the conditions slightly. So we've got, there are a couple of soundproofing conditions, yeah, 8.1.20. So sound insulation is required for buildings. Yeah, we've got the figures for what the sound insulation is. We just need to reword it slightly so that we can...
You're going to reword it so it's stronger in terms of soundproofing or weaker?
Well, I think it'll be the same figure. It just needs to be clear that it's also to protect the residential units from noise from the railway.
Okay. Okay. Any more? I've got a couple.
Sorry.
Sorry,
you asked me before, but I hadn't quite formulated it in my head. I'm looking at condition 8.1.13 about landscaping and play. Is there a different condition about the internal playroom? Because that's it. I was looking for it with this, but or are we going to ask for a management plan for the playroom? Because what I'd hate to see is that children's playroom become used as a storage room or something like that and not be of benefit to the children. So are we asking for a management plan, or are we imposing conditions to make sure that it remains as a playroom?
Yeah, that's not in there at the moment. Yeah, we should ask for a condition to ensure that it remains as a playroom. But I think that children's play was a key part of this proposal from the start. So it will be provided. Well, I'm sure the applicant wants to provide it, but yes, we're willing to do it.
Yeah, I'm sure the applicant wants to, but it might even strengthen the applicant's hand if it's a planning condition that says it may only be used as a playroom without, and it would need planning permission to change that. Because if the residents decided to start storing luggage there or something like that,
I think. Thank you. That's point well made. It's I mean, clearly the lack of a ground floor play space is disappointing, I guess. But going up to the top floor, Steve was going to ask about the, it's going to be a 2 meter high fencing essentially on that roof space, isn't it? Is that going to be a thing of beauty up there, or what's that going to look like?
I think.
Back. Yes, John, you can tell me that.
Okay, thank you. I think we had the idea of, I just can't recall the name of it immediately to my head, but it's a tower, a very famous tower in Italy, which it's quite incredible. It's got some trees, an oak, a kind of a copse of oak trees growing on top of it. So we had that in terms of the idea. The idea is that it's a sinuous form, and therefore it would look like when it's fully grown out with ivy and it's verdant, it would somehow evoke that we're using kind of very natural metaphors of rock-like spaces, and so the idea of having a copse of trees sitting on top, if you like, we like the idea of that.
So is that controllable by the planning conditions, Yvette?
Yeah, there's a condition for the details of the screening of the green roof.
Okay, so that'll be thought about. Right, my second point is on the ground floor where there's doors that open out onto the pavement. Now, why didn't Kazim spot that?
I'm just trying to find the plan. Yvette, have you got a plan that you could share, please?
Yeah.
That's not something that, that's something that has been missed, if that's the case.
Architect, can you help us? Do those doors open out onto the pavement like they look on the drawings?
I'm afraid I've just been having technical problems throughout this whole thing, and some councillors, I'm afraid, keep getting cut out. We will look at that. I think the idea was that it was just when the bins were being removed, but I think that's something that we can clearly make improvements on in the next stage of the development of the scheme.
Okay, thank you. The second point, this adjacent building, this is to Israel. Israel, you've got a load of sheds that front onto the railway there. I think people are living in them. Did they have planning permission to be living in them? What's the status of that accommodation there? Israel, can you unmute yourself? Oh, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can.
So some of those units are long leasehold units where separate leaseholders are in control of the uses of those units. And some of those units have got the planning permission, particularly some of the units that are in control of under our control, which are the freeholders' control, have got planning permission for residential use.
Okay. What, by default or a specific planning permission?
No specific planning permission. I mean, one of the planning permissions were done under the permitted development from office use to residential.
Okay. Okay. John, are you around? John, sorry?
Chair, yes, he is.
Hi, Chair. Evening.
Hello. Do you know about those?
We do, Chair. We're very aware of the residential uses in the industrial premises, and the enforcement team have investigated and taken action where known. This wasn't really helped when the government revised the PD rights to allow changes subject to prior approval, which the applicant mentioned there. This resulted in both the loss of such vital uses as well as units which don't really meet size and layout standards, which we were unable to prevent. In response to that, we placed an Article 4 direction restricting such changes of use, but until that happened, a couple of prior approvals were obtained simply because we were unable to refuse them on those grounds. But despite that, the enforcement team have been very active in taking action, and we've successfully served notices and on appeals.
Okay. And does that affect your assessment at all, the fact that there are some people living in those places?
No, we were aware of those. Well, we're aware of the enforcement action in that location.
Okay, I've finished. Any more questions? There are none. Okay, and I don't think we added any conditions, did we? So the recommendation, is that all right? So same again, we're going to put our hands up, either for or against. So the recommendation is to grant conditional planning permission subject to a legal agreement. All those in favour, please show. And I'll read it out. So I'm in favour. Councillor Hanson?
In favour.
Councillor John Thomas?
In favour.
Councillor Levy? Councillor Levy? Okay, I'll miss him out. Councillor
In favour.
In favour. Councillor Bell?
In favour.
Councillor Snell?
In favour.
Can't see your hand, Councillor Snell. Thank you. Councillor Potter?
In favour.
Councillor Race?
In favour, Chair.
And Councillor Sherman?
In favour.
I think that's all of us. Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing your building progress.
I got all those, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. So, without further ado, we haven't got item 7, and we'll note all the delegated decisions. I think that's it. Well done, everybody. Is anybody, Natalie, is there anything going on the at all we need to know about? I don't think so.
Chair, I can notice Israel Gold is raising up his hand. I don't know what.